Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra. Because we are on a Friday. Incroyable, everybody. Incroyable. End of the working week. Where did that go? Oh, terrifying. Here we are in the library, he said grandly. We've got the fire on tonight. We've only got it on for effect. It's quite warm, I think is the best way of describing today. What are we reading? Well, actually, we're still reading Scottish Ghosts, but I am minded of the fact that as we're at the end of the month, we do need to dip into the Ghostly Almanac of Devon and Cornwall. So we might nip into that for a couple of short ones. What are we drinking tonight? Well, sadly, we've used up all the subscription beers, but we still have some Love Lane Brewery Blackbird in the fridge. And we've got this tonight, which is, I can't remember where I got this from, probably also from Home Bargains, Collier's Cider. Made in Somerset, an expert blend of the finest Somerset apples created by family cider makers to ensure satisfying refreshment. Enjoy true taste from the heart of cider country. Brothers Drinks Limited, Showering Cider Mill, Kilver Street, Shepton Mallet, Somerset, BA4 5ND. Enjoy Collier's cider responsibly. Right, brace yourselves, folks. 8.4%. That's the strongest, certainly the strongest beer / cider I've had on the show. So, looking forward to that. What are we washing it down with? Kelsurprise, the Western Gold Honey, which is 35%. So not quite as strong as the Arbracken, which comes in at 41%, but no, that's good enough. So Derp is outside, by the way. He's enjoying the sunshine. So shall we crack on with a Ghostly Almanac of Devon and Cornwall? Bodmin, Cornwall. On the 8th of May 2001, 25 years ago, the Cornish Guardian published an article written by Nicky Sargason, which was a plea for help and information from the owner of the Maple Leaf Cafe in Bodmin. Fiona Thompson told reporters of what seemed to be the regular appearance of a male ghost at the cafe, usually at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The front door of the cafe was often heard to open and close on its own. During the previous summer, both the owner and a waitress had clearly seen a man walking upstairs. However, when they went to take his order, there was nobody there, even though anyone leaving the upstairs room would have had to walk downstairs again and could not possibly have done so without passing the proprietor and waitress. On occasions, the man was said to stand by the till watching workers in the kitchen, and staff and customers have also heard strange coughing sounds. The newspaper brought in a psychic medium, presumably a psychic extra large wasn't available, who claimed to have made contact with a previous tenant of the premises. According to the medium, the man and his brother had both served in the Duke of Cornwall Light Infantry during the First World War. The brother had died in the conflict, and the supposed male presence at the cafe had been wounded. He had returned to Bodmin and begun a relationship with his brother's widow, but their romance had ended. Fiona Thompson assured the Cornish Guardian journalist that the ghost did not appear to be evil, although she and the staff found being alone in the cafe quite spooky. I think we'll have a thunderclap for that. So, and run VT. I think we will have some of the Collier's cider in the magnificent Rush beer glass. Thank you, viewers Kirsten and Steve in the United States. That's not too fizzy. It's actually quite sweet. It tastes more like apple juice, which reminds me of 7 years ago being in Porlock with friend Drew, and we were at the Weir Fest at Porlock Weir, and we were having some cider, and we both thought, oh, this is fairly kind of tame. It doesn't taste like cider, it just tastes like fruit juice. Then we went to stand up and we both kind of went, oh. So we decided that it was a hot day, that would be it, and we would head back to the B&B and sleep it off. So anyway, there we go. Collier's cider, made in Somerset, 8.4%. Uh-oh, Dead Soldier and Run BT.
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, Dead Soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
Hey. Oh. The beer yawns, and we haven't even had a beer. We've had a cider yawns. Right. Devonport, Plymouth, Devon. On the 31st of May 2004, the Plymouth Herald reported on the findings of a team of paranormal investigators who had been called in by the Royal Navy to try and solve some of the unexplained phenomena reported at the naval base at Devonport. The focus of the investigations were the Hangman's Cell, which houses what is thought to be the last remaining functional gallows in Britain, and the Master Ropemaker's House, which dates back to the 18th century and has previously been described as the most haunted place in Plymouth. It is believed that more than 140 French prisoners of war were executed at Devonport during the Napoleonic Wars, and base personnel have variously reported sightings of a young girl dressed in Victorian costume, a sailor, a woman in a long gown, an 18th century naval officer, a little girl playing with a doll, and a bearded man who was frequently heard humming tunes. In addition, there have been reports of unexplained cold spots and sudden drops in temperature, and of lights being inexplicably switched on when there was nobody present. On occasions, a man's face appears looking out of the window of a supposedly empty attic. People have reported being pushed and furniture has been moved. Windows appear to open and close by themselves, and, as well as the humming sailor, footsteps, banging noises, and even the sound of a horse-drawn carriage have been heard in the vicinity. One family who lived in the Master Ropemaker's House in the 1970s claimed that the Formica work surfaces in their kitchen were once completely torn to pieces. At the end of their weekend investigation, the team stated that they believed, beyond any reasonable doubt, that they had detected paranormal activity at the base. 4 years later, in August 2008, the Daily Mail published an account from a cleaner who had seen a mysterious sailor dressed in an old-fashioned trench coat carrying a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. The man appeared so solid that the cleaner actually spoke to him, bidding him good morning. The man smiled at her, at which the cleaner briefly turned away. When she looked back moments later, the man had completely disappeared. His only possible exit without walking straight past the cleaner was through heavy glass doors, but according to the cleaner, the doors were extremely noisy, and had the man opened them, she would definitely have heard him. I think we need a thunderclap after that one. Ba-ba-boom. Cider time, slange me bar. That's very refreshing. Like I say, it doesn't taste like cider. Right, Kenton near Exeter, Devon. On the 9th of May 1855, the Manchester Guardian printed an article in which it was claimed that the inhabitants of the village of Kenton, which lies just outside Exeter, had been terrorised by the presence of a ghost. An unnamed inhabitant of the village had died while away from home and, before her death, had requested that her body was buried in the churchyard at her native village. However, her dying request was not granted. And not only that, but her money passed to one of her daughters to the exclusion of her other children. These circumstances combined were, according to the villagers, sufficient to ensure that the old woman's spirit would never rest in peace. And shortly after her death, lights were reported moving around in her empty cottage, usually at around 10 o'clock in the evening, when it had been the old lady's custom to retire to bed. People flocked from the surrounding villages at the appointed time every night to watch the mysterious lights flickering from room to room in the darkened cottage. Eventually, the village schoolmaster, Mr. Jones, decided to spend the night in the cottage and professed himself to be quite untroubled by any ghost throughout his solitary vigil. This divided the opinions of the villagers, some of whom were reassured and others who continued to believe that the spirit of the old lady had returned to her home, even though her physical body had not. I think we'll have that. All this chapter is, they're all beautifully short this time round. So, stretch my legs out. Slange me, everybody. I think we are going to get some more Collier's cider in future because it is Skirt Lush, Lapford, Devon. On the 23rd of May, 1861, the Reverend John Arundel Radford was buried at Lapford Church, where he had been the incumbent vicar for many years. There is anecdotal evidence that Parson Jack, as he was known to his parishioners, murdered his curate, but he was acquitted because the jury said that they had never yet hung a man of the cloth and weren't about to start. While I have not been able to verify the murder, there is abundant evidence that John Radford's behaviour during his incumbency at Lapford was most unbecoming for a man of his status. Throughout the 1850s, there are numerous reports of him being summoned for failure to pay his bills, and a further account of a trial for poaching, at which he was found guilty and given a fine. In December 1851, he took out the following notice in the Exeter Flying Post. Notice: to shopkeepers, tradesmen, and others, whereas Thomasin Elizabeth Radford, my wife, has contracted debts without my knowledge, after having been repeatedly requested not to do so, thereby causing me great vexation and trouble, and heaping on me insufferable difficulties, I therefore hereby warn and give notice to all persons whomsoever not to harbour or trust the said Thomasin Elizabeth Radford, or any of my family, as I will not be answerable for or pay any debt or debts that either she or they may in future contract. John A. Radford, dated Lapford, December the 10th, 1851. By February of the following year, he was again in court, summoned by a local butcher who was seeking settlement of an outstanding debt of £39 12 shillings and threepence for meat. However unhappy his marriage to his wife Thomasin may have been, a report of the incident in the Times states that the couple had 13 children together. His repeated court appearances for bad debt continued until, In January 1855, he was charged at the Cholmondeley Petty Sessions with assaulting a constable. A bailiff had visited Radford to serve a summons on him for yet another outstanding amount. The bailiff had taken the precaution of asking a parish constable to accompany him, and Radford had struck the constable 4 times, then forcibly ejected him from his premises. Found guilty by the magistrates and ordered to pay a fine of £4 and 5 shillings, including costs, Radford vowed that he wouldn't pay a farthing and was promptly sent to Exeter Prison for 1 month. Having served his sentence, Radford returned to Lapford, where he resumed his clerical duties. Described in the Times as a powerful, athletic man who had for many years been addicted to field sports and displayed an extraordinary bluntness of manner and conversation, John Radford survived only another 6 years, dying at the age of 62. In life, John Radford had always expressed a wish to be buried in the chancel of the church where he had served for so long as rector, threatening to come back and haunt his parishioners if his request were denied. In the event, he was buried outside the vestry door, a position which he was obviously unhappy about, as he has allegedly haunted the village ever since. Legend has it that Radford decreed that his headstone would never stand up straight if he was buried anywhere other than his chosen location. However, a visit to Lapford Church will confirm that few, if any, of the headstones there are straight. We're just going to do some sums here for the moment. I need to go to the Bank of England's inflation calculator. Right, Bank of England inflation calculator. Bear with, folks. This is important research. It's what I do in the day job. So, Bank of England inflation calculator. Here we go. Right, Bank of England inflation calculator. So let's look at that cost again. It was lost where we are, £39. Let's put it in as £39. So £39 back in, what was it, 18, oops, lazy. Come on, JM, you can do this. 1855. So £39 in 1855 in 2026 would be the equivalent of £3,728.77. No wonder the butcher was a bit miffed. £3,000. How much meat are you eating to get £3,000? Goodness me, I don't think I could do that if I only bought Waitrose finest sausages, and I'm a vegetarian. So 3,000. Was it £3,700? Nearly £4,000. Yeah, 3,728 quid. So yeah, nearly £4,000 in meat. He liked his meat, and we know what else he liked. So cheers, me beers. Well, up to 21 minutes, right? I think we'll probably finish this book, finish this chapter by half time. So, Sampford Peveril, Devon. John Chave and his family, along with their servants, and William Taylor, who was Mr. Chave's brother. John Chave and his family, along with their servants, and William Taylor, who was Mr. Chave's brother, occupied a huckster's shop in Higher Town, Sampford Peveril. Prior to Mr. Chave's tenancy of the property, it seems that there had been a solitary report of a sighting of the ghost of a woman at the house. made by an apprentice, which nobody had taken seriously. However, when the Chave family took up residence, apparent poltergeist activity began in earnest with a serious, I think I should be serious, not serious, with a series of thunderous knockings and raps that appeared to emanate from the upper floors. By May 1810, which is 6:10, the activity had escalated to the extent that the female servants were being physically attacked nightly, being beaten by unseen fists. At least 3 of the servants appeared to sustain an actual injury at the hands of the unseen entity, and it was noted that if there were no women present in the house, or if the women were asleep, the paranormal activity ceased. The fearsome noises echoing through the house intensified until they were almost constant. They included the sound of footsteps walking downstairs and continuing through a solid wall. Curtains were rattled ferociously, and a sword and a Bible were thrown violently through the air. On one occasion, Mr. Taylor saw the sword suspended in midair, pointing directly at him, although it subsequently fell harmlessly to the floor. A strange monster was seen roaming about the property, compared by one witness to an enormous black rabbit, which fled when approached, disappearing through the close-set palings of the garden fence. The local clergyman, Reverend Caleb Colton, was called to investigate and later wrote an account of the apparent paranormal activity in a pamphlet entitled Plain and Authentic Narrative of the Samford Ghost. The story was picked up by the Taunton Courier, whose reporting of the affair was largely disbelieving in tone. The authenticity of the ghost had divided the residents of Samford Peveril, many of whom suspected that John Chave had deliberately faked the paranormal activity in an effort to purchase the property at a greatly reduced price. Reverend Colton sprang to Chave's defense, pointing out that at no time had he shown any interest in buying the property. Some villagers believed that Chave was involved in smuggling or other illegal activities and had created the stories of haunting in order to frighten people away from the property. However, others were convinced of the existence of the Samford ghost. One anonymous person was so certain of the truth of the facts that he sent a death threat to the newspaper's editor in protest at the apparent cynicism expressed by his paper. On the 18th of August, 1810, the Taunton Courier published a letter from Caleb Colton, in which he swore an oath that he had spent 4 nights at the property and had seen and heard the phenomena for himself, and that he was unable to attribute the various activities he had witnessed to any human hand. During the course of his investigations, he had personally sealed every single door and cavity in the house through which any communication could be carried on, with a wax seal applied to each end of pieces of paper in such a way that the slightest attempt to open such doors or to pass such cavities would have broken these papers. Not one seal had been disturbed. Not one seal had been disturbed. Several women not connected to the family in any way had spent a night at the house, and, without exception, each had reported a disturbed night punctuated by repeated blows, the opening and closing of curtains, pressure from a suffocating weight on their bodies, and infernal noises, which on occasions were sufficiently loud to cause the room to shake. All of these women were willing to be interviewed and to swear an oath to the authenticity of their experiences, as were more than 20 other reliable and trustworthy people, some of whose names Colton listed at the end of his letter. Mr. John Govert, surgeon, Tiverton. Mr. Betty, surgeon, Tiverton. Mr. Pulling, merchant, Tiverton. Mr. Quick, landlord of the White Horse, Tiverton. Mr. Merson, surgeon, Samford Peveril. John Cowling, Esquire, Samford Peveril. Mr. Chave, Mere, near Huntsham. In September 1810, the case made the national newspapers, and on 18th of October, the Times printed a deposition from John Govert, the mayor of Tiverton. The deposition was dated Thursday, the 27th of September 1810, and was a sworn statement from John Chave, William Taylor, and servants Sally Chase and James Dodge, made before Govert in his official capacity as mayor. It stated that they were all completely ignorant of the cause of all the extraordinary occurrences at Chave's house, and that none of them had personally ever made any of the noises or struck any of the blows, or indeed made any attempt whatsoever to trick anyone into believing that there was supernatural activity afoot, and neither had they requested anyone else to do so on their behalf. Furthermore, each of the four stated that if anyone else was responsible for perpetrating a hoax, it was without his or her knowledge or consent. The four swore before Govert that they were all anxious and eager to discover the cause of the phenomena. They attested that marks observed on the walls and ceilings of the property were the result of investigators trying, without success, to replicate the noisy disturbances in the house in order to produce a rational explanation. Furthermore, to their knowledge, there were no subterranean passages. In or out of the house. Reverend Colton pointed out to the newspapers that if the Samford ghost were a hoax, then its perpetration now involved at least 50 people, who were all willing to perjure themselves on oath to claim their innocence of any trickery or fraud. Eventually, Colton offered a reward of £250 to anyone who could solve the mystery, and although that sum equated to a small fortune in the early 1800s, the reward was never claimed. And more for this chapter, and then we'll pick up on, well, at half time, then we'll pick up on the Scottish ghost book. So, slides with everybody. Tywardreath, Cornwall. On an inside wall of the parish church at Tywardreath is a plaque commemorating the former MP for Fowey, William Rashley, and his wife Caroline. Rashley died on the 14th of May, 1855, which is 5 minutes to 7. And strange occurrences have been reported inside the church on the anniversary of his death. A plume of black smoke has been seen issuing from the memorial tablet and forming itself into a shape said to be human. The figure then drifts around the church before disappearing, often accompanied by loud banging noises, and in 1997 by the crash of a wall hanging falling from the wall onto the floor. At other times, one of the church bells is said to ring without the assistance of any human hand, and a former cleaner has reported seeing the figure of a monk, is he called Harry? Let's find out, standing in the aisle. The apparition quickly dissolved as she looked at it. Bow, bow, bow. Oh my goodness me. Right. That's the Ghostly Almanac of Devon and Cornwall done for this month. So by the time we get round to doing June, we will have passed the longest day. By the time we get round to reading the June chapter, the nights will have started to be drawing in. Terrifying thought. Anyway, Slangery, everybody. Oh no, we'll have the bump at half time. After half time, right? What have we been up to today? Today we have been doing stuff in the garden. I have been preparing the veg patch so I can get my potatoes in tomorrow, and my not my sweet corn, my potatoes in tomorrow, and my pumpkins. Got the beer burps coming up, folks. Here we go. Oh, there we go. The beer burps at, oh, that's better, 33 minutes and 15 seconds. So I need to get my potatoes and my pumpkins in tomorrow. And so the quickest way of doing that, I went at it with the fork. I was chopping back a load of overgrowth, but yeah, I went at it in the end with the electric tiller. Oh my goodness me, what a job it does. It does it ever so quickly. So we've still got stuff to clear to the right of the tiller, but oh no, this will make life so much easier. It's quite heavy clay soil, and so it breaks it up and aerates it a bit more. So, and we've, like I say, we've still got another area to clear, but at least tomorrow I can start getting some spuds in, and I can start planting out some of the pumpkin plants that I have carefully hoarded, sown and grown. So we'll get them in. So because this is it's a south-facing aspect of the garden, so what I shall probably do is plant the pumpkins right at the top, by where the potato bags are there, and then dig some trenches and put the potatoes in as well. So the pumpkins will sit in like a gully or a valley where I've scraped dirt out to earth up the potatoes. So it's in theory anyway, but at least we can get that started tomorrow. So good news, everybody, good news. Right, yesterday, what were we up to yesterday? Yesterday was, she's going to hate me for doing this, but yesterday was my very good friend Tara's birthday. 3 years ago, essentially, Tara was the person who sensed that there was something wrong with me. Tell me, people are thinking at the moment, well, surely that's a given, but she could sense that it wasn't long COVID. She came round at the weekend. Apparently, I was not making sense. She called an ambulance, and that's how I ended up with the holes in my head. I don't blame her for it. No, she saved my life. Anyway, it was her birthday yesterday. So I said to her, Tar, where do you want to go? And she said, I wouldn't mind going to Monmouth. Actually, we were going to go to, and I keep forgetting the name of the blessed place. We were originally going to go to, I can't find the blessed, I can't find the blessed post now. Symonds Yat, which sounds like it's in Wales, actually in Gloucestershire. So we were going to go to Symonds Yat. We went there, we had a brilliant lunch, but it turns out Symonds Yat hasn't got that much going for it. So we ended up going to Monmouth. Anyway, so there is Tara enjoying her birthday cup of tea at Simmons Yacht. Very good place we went to. We had the vegan breakfast, which was delicious, absolutely fantastic. And then this was some of the stuff that was in the cafe at Simmons Yacht. And then we went to Monmouth, where we saw this brilliant sculpture, absolutely fabulous stuff, and more great sculptures in Monmouth. Oh, Monmouth is brilliant. Best way of describing Monmouth, it's a combination of Chepstow and Taunton. Loads of charity shops. The high street is brilliant. I cannot wait to go back there. And the one thing we were going to do yesterday was Monmouth Castle. We never got round to it. We were too busy hitting the shops. So again, it's on the return list to do Monmouth Castle. And that's going across the river, and that's the entrance as you go into Monmouth. Absolutely brilliant. Love the place. And this was the Robin Hood Inn. And it makes a reference there, is one of Monmouth's oldest buildings. Its restored front doorway dates from the 16th century, and some interior features from the 17th century. In the 18th century, before Catholic emancipation, an upper room here was used to celebrate Mass. So there's the door. Note to self, we've got to go in there next time. So, yeah. And here's just some heritage plaques to do with Monmouth. Honestly, I fell in love with the place. Absolutely brilliant. Only about 40 minutes over the bridge. So, and there is also a statue to, oh God, I'm trying to think what his name was now. It's Mr. Rolls from Rolls-Royce. So what did you do on Friday night? I tuned in to watch Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra, but instead he was too busy faffing around trying to remember the name of the bloody... It is Charles Stuart Rolls. So Charles Stuart Rolls of Rolls-Royce fame was born in Monmouth on the 27th. No, I'm trying to think. 1877. Anyway, there we go. Brilliant sculpture, absolutely fabulous. Oh, the bee shop. We went in there. Oh my goodness me! I massively overspent. What did I get? I got some bits and pieces. Yeah, absolutely fabulous shop. Really like that. Monmouth is brilliant. What can I say? And then we stopped off at the one of the cafes in the high street, where I had my first chai cold drink. Oh my goodness me. I'm a convert, absolutely a convert. And that's it. So a big happy birthday to Tara, because quite frankly, without her diligence, I wouldn't be here tonight doing ghost stories. So thank you, Tara. I mustn't abbreviate a name to that, but she'll hate me for that. But and then also today, I went and helped my very good friend Anne with her garden, which is good fun. I've known Anne for, goodness me, 23 years. Yeah, 23 years. That stems from going out to, cycling out to Shirehampton and discovering a cafe there called Griddles. And there was a young lady working behind the counter called Anne who served me my cup of tea. And that's where it all kind of started. So today I was doing some gardening for Anne. So there we go. There she is. She's absolutely brilliant. Love her to bits. Yeah, it was good. Oh, there we go. There we go. So it's good. It was quite hot though. I mean, today has been absolute frazzler, but no, brilliant friend, absolutely fabulous. So there we go. And then back home, did the work in the garden, preparing the potato and the pumpkin patch. And before you know it, it's time for ghost stories. So let's finish off the rest of the cider. Cheers, me beers. Oh, lovely. Oh, got some fan mail. Let's just read the fan mail. Oh, no, I can't read that out. That's absolutely... No, I can't read that out. But anyway. Right, part 2 of tonight's quality entertainment. And we are going to catch up with one of the stories that we skipped the other night because it was far too long to read, but we are going to read it tonight. The Brahman Seer. The name of the Brahman Seer. Oh no, actually, before we do that, God, let's get our priorities right. We've got to get our beer. So this is another brilliant beer from Home Bargains, which I love. It's quite funny actually. Yesterday, I said to Tara, "Oh, there's a Home Bargains here," and she said, "We can do Home Bargains anytime. We've got one where she lives, one where I live." So we made a policy decision that we wouldn't go to Home Bargains. Ended up going to Home Bargains, didn't we? I think she spent more on it than I did, but I've got the beer burps coming again. Oh, there we go. That's better. Right, let's let that brew a bit now. The Brahman Seer. The name of the Brahman Seer has been associated with prophecies in many areas of Scotland over a very long period of time. His identity is often confused with others in history who had similar abilities. Stories of his prophecies have been at times confused both with the prophecies of other seers and also with mere superstition. That such a man did exist is believed to be fact. It is not known, however, how many of the stories that are told about him are true, or which stories might have been associated with him in error. In one way, the Brahman Seer was typical of many of those with second sight, in that he had no aspirations to fame. He appeared to be able to foretell certain things with accuracy, and this made him something of a celebrity. There are conflicting theories about his origins, but the most likely theory is that he became known as the Brahman Seer because he was a labourer on the estate of the same name 350 years ago. The Brahman Seer made many predictions, but 2 of them stand out as chilling warnings of the route that history was to take. It is said that the Brahman Seer visited Culloden long before the famous battle where the Jacobite forces were routed, and that on walking through the area that was destined to be the battlefield, he stopped. Then he said, "This bleak moor, ere many generations have passed, shall be stained with the best blood of Scotland. Glad I am that I will not see that day." Glad I am that I will not see the day. The second prediction, the one for which he is best known, was made by the Brahman Seer just before his own untimely death, which he suffered as a result of his unfortunate gift. The Countess of Seaforth had asked the Brahman Seer if he could give her some news of her husband, who was overseas in France. The Earl had travelled to France to attend to some business, but he had been away for a long time, and the Countess was getting a little suspicious. The seer was initially reluctant to tell the Countess what he saw. He tried to fob her off with vague generalizations, but the lady was most insistent that he tell her exactly what was going on. The Brahan seer, so pressed, threw caution to the wind and told the Countess everything. He went into great detail about her husband's activities. Apparently, the Earl of Seaforth was not attending to clan business as he ought to have been, but having a fine old time consorting with another fair damsel. The seer described the woman, the luxurious surroundings, and the obvious pleasure the Earl was taking in the woman's company. It might have been what the Countess had feared, but it was not at all what she wanted to hear. So enraged was the Countess at what the Brahan seer had to say that she vented her anger upon him there and then. She saw to it that he was charged with witchcraft. She saw to it that he was charged with witchcraft and burnt to death. I think we'll salute him with a drink there. Before he died, however, the seer made his most astonishing prophecy. I see into the far future, and I read the doom of my oppressor. The long descended line of Seaforth will, ere many generations have passed, end in extinction and sorrow. I see a chief, the last of his house, both deaf and dumb. He will be father of 4 fair sons, all of whom he will follow to the tomb. He will live careworn and die mourning, knowing that the honours of his line are to be extinguished forever, and that no future chief of the Mackenzies shall bear rule at Brahan or in Kintail. After lamenting over the last and most promising of his sons, he himself shall sink into the grave, and the remnant of his possessions shall be inherited by a white-hooded lass from the east, and she is to kill her sister. As a sign by which it may be known that these things are coming to pass, there shall be 4 great lairds in the days of the last Seaforth, the deaf and dumb chief, and these lairds shall be Gairloch, Chisholm, Grant, and Rasay, and one shall be buck-toothed, another hare-lipped, another half-witted, and the 4th a stammerer. Chiefs like these shall be the allies and neighbours of the last of the Seaforths, and when he looks around him and sees them, he shall know that his sons are doomed to death, that his broad land shall pass away to the stranger, and that his race shall come to an end. Such a pronouncement, so startling in its detail, sounding as much like a curse as anything, was hardly likely to save the Brahan seer from his fate. He was duly put to death. His prediction was to come true, uncannily accurate in every detail. The Earl of Seaforth returned from France in due course and was astounded at what his wife had done. He was even more disturbed when he heard what the last words of the Brahan seer had been. The Earl of Seaforth died in 1678 and was succeeded by his son, who was the 4th Earl. The family had their ups and downs, but fared reasonably well for some years. The 5th Earl of Seaforth lost his estates and titles after the rebellion of 1715, which is about 5:15, but the lands were eventually restored. Both he and his son enjoyed wealth and position, and in 1771 the family was allowed to regain the title of Seaforth when his son was made Earl. He was to be the last Earl of Seaforth, for the title died out when he did. He was succeeded for 2 years by a second cousin who died in 1783, leaving the chiefdom of the Mackenzies to his brother, who was the last in line. 3 generations had passed. Coming up, Derbs. Come on. Come on, Defo. Here he is, the star of the show. The last of the Seaforth line was Francis Humberton Mackenzie. He was born in 1755, which is 5 minutes to 6, and became deaf at quite an early age as a result of illness. He was not dumb initially, but over the years he spoke less and less, becoming more or less mute in old age. The words of the Brahman seer were coming true. There were 4 contemporaries of Francis, chiefs who bore the characteristics that the seer had predicted. They were Mackenzie of Gairloch, who was buck-toothed, Chisholm of Chisholm, who had a hare lip, MacLeod of Rasay, who had a stammer, and Grant, Baronet of Grant, who was said to be half-witted. Francis Mackenzie married a woman called Mary, and she bore him 6 children in all, 2 girls and 4 boys. Francis must have had the words of the Brahman seer ringing in his ears for most of his married life, for all four of his sons did indeed predecease him, the last born dying very young. Francis died in 1815, the last chief. His estates passed to his daughter, Mary Frederica Elizabeth Mackenzie. Her husband, Admiral Sir Samuel Hood, had only just died in India, and when she returned home to take possession of her father's estate, she was in mourning. So a lass had, as predicted, come from the east. She was also white-hooded. Not only did she bear the married name of Hood, but she was dressed in white widow's clothes. Mary eventually remarried, and her new husband took over the estates. Seaforth had now gone from the family. In the final part of the Brahman seer's prophecy, the final part of the Brahman seer's prophecy came true when Mary and her sister had an accident while out riding in a carriage one day. Mary, who had been driving the carriage, survived, but her sister died. The white-hooded lass had killed her sister. The origin or cause of the visions that came to those with second sight is not known. In some ways, the Brahman seer was not typical of most people who had second sight. First, he had several visions throughout his life. Most people who have second sight have few visions. Most people who have second sight have few visions. Many have only one. Secondly, the Brahman seer used a white stone, possibly a crystal, to help him see into the future. With most other people, the visions that they experience come uninvited and unprompted. Are the visions that appear to those with second sight things that have come from some unseen external influence, or do they have their origins within the psyche of the individual? The fact that the visions are more often than not unwelcome and unpleasant, very frightening at times, must make one wonder, is a vision of bad things to come in any way similar to the phantom funeral, a sign from the world of the already... Is a vision of bad things to come in any way similar to the phantom funeral, a sign from the world of the already dead? A ghost story that comes from the Isle of Skye suggests that some people believed such an explanation was likely. Right, that's the end of that chapter. Derpy's there he is. You can see him perched on my lap there. I think this is calls for a thunderclap. And run VT. Well, popular lad tonight. Cheers, me beers. Oh, lovely. Oh, this is the last of the love lane for tonight. Oh, we're going to have another dead soldier here. Yeah, gives it a good shake. The beer can, that is. Uh-oh, dead soldier and run VT.
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, dead soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
Oh, ha, 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 ha. Right, I'm just going to bear with, folks. Bear with. All right, here we go. So I picked up some Galaxy Maltesers hot chocolate station, which was going cheap as chips in B&M this afternoon. So I'm just getting loads of messages here at the moment. Let me just read my messages. Oh, more messages. Goodness me, I'm a popular lad tonight. Right, Derps, what are we up to? We are up to, goodness me, are we nearly up to the hour mark? We nearly are. We haven't even had a bump yet. So let's have a bump, shall we? Slange me bar. That'll guarantee I sleep tonight, I can tell you. Right, let's crack on, shall we? What are we up to? This next part of the chapter, we're on to a new chapter now, Ghosts Assaulted. There are some ghost stories that do not fit quite so neatly as others into any of the previous categories. They should not be ignored, however, and hence have been given a chapter of their own. 2 dead peddlers. Life must have been dangerous for the original travelling salesman. Carrying their goods and their profits around with them, they were easy prey for robbers. There are quite a few stories from various parts of Scotland that tell of poor peddlers who have come to grief at the hands of ruthless vagabonds. Sometimes something remains to make sure that the fate of the peddlers is not forgotten. Oh my goodness me! No, I thought this was a massive one there for a second. I go hungry, folks. What have I eaten today? Only chocolates and biscuits. It was chocolates and biscuits at friend Anne's, mowing her lawn. No, I wasn't mowing her lawn. I was doing some gardening work. But anyway, cheers, me beers. And we have just banged through the hour mark. So, Slange. The Schoolmaster and the Peddler. In the early 19th century, the body of a peddler was found floating in the waters of Loch Assynt.
The body had a severe wound to the head, and no one could find his peddler's pack. Foul play was immediately suspected. The peddler had been a Wheel Kent figure around these parts. He made himself a fine living selling goods around the district and was thought to have been reasonably wealthy. Robbery was therefore the most likely motive for the attack, but no one had seen or heard anything. As no evidence had been left at the scene and there had been no witnesses to the event, it was decided to resort to the old practice of ordeal by touch in an attempt to identify the peddler's killer. This practice had no basis in scientific fact, but had once been widely used in Scotland as a means of eliminating suspects in cases of murder. Suspects were made to touch the body of the murder victim. When the corpse was touched by the killer, it was supposed to bleed. All those who had been in the area at the time when the peddler met his death were asked to touch the body, and most of them obliged. The schoolmaster in the local school, however, refused to take part in the bizarre ritual. He argued, most convincingly, that the peddler had probably fallen into the loch and hit his head on a stone. There was no gain to be had from pandering to superstition. The schoolmaster was an intelligent man with considerable influence in the community. It was agreed that his theory as to the likely cause of the death of the peddler was plausible. Besides, there was no real evidence to the contrary. The case was closed, and the peddler was buried. Some weeks later, the peddler's brother came looking for him. When he heard the story of his brother's death, he was not at all satisfied that justice had been done. If the peddler had not been robbed and murdered, then where were his pack and the goods and money that would have been with it? If the peddler had not been robbed and murdered, then where were his pack and the goods and money that would have been in it? The peddler's brother investigated the matter himself and at once began to suspect the schoolmaster. He seemed to have an awful lot of money, even for a man in his position, and his tastes were undeniably expensive. The peddler's brother consulted a man with second sight, and the man told him of a vision that he had had of a murder committed by the schoolmaster. This was not real evidence in itself, but the visionary was then able to tell the peddler's brother and the police where the empty pack had been hidden. The schoolmaster was questioned. Eventually, he confessed to his crime and suffered the appropriate penalty. But the fate of the peddler is not forgotten. The terrible deed on the shore of Loch Assynt is reenacted in ghostly form every year. The sickening sound of a skull being cracked echoes across the water, followed by a splash and the sound of the culprit's footsteps fleeing the scene. I think that deserves a thunder crash. Derps. Goodness me, I'm trying to do ghost stories here. I've got this big lump perched on my lap here. He's digging his claws into my knee as well. Cheers, me beers. Slide. Oh, got some more fan mail. Fancy not getting some more wasabi mix. All right. I'll have to put that to correct that tomorrow. Anyway, the Sanquhar peddler. There was once a shepherd called Gourlay who lived near the town of Sanquhar in Dumfriesshire. He was smitten by a young woman, know the feeling, who lived in a farmhouse a few miles away. The woman's name was Mary Graham, and she lived with her two brothers, Robert and Joseph. One night, the shepherd went to call on Mary Graham, but as he approached the farmhouse, he was alerted by the sounds of a struggle. Deciding that it was better not to risk going straight in by the front door, he crept up to a window and surreptitiously peeked inside. To his horror, he saw his sweetheart and her two brothers struggling with a man. It was hard at first to make out who the man was, but as soon as Gourlay caught a glimpse of his face, he recognized him as a peddler who regularly plied his wares around the district. Within moments, Gourlay saw Mary Graham and her two brothers beat the poor man into submission and then strangle him. Graham fled back home, all thoughts of romance gone. He was horrified at what he had seen. Obviously, the Grahams had been intent on robbing the peddler. What were they going to do with his body? It was too terrible to contemplate. He told his mother about what had happened that night. He told his mother what had happened that night and swore her to secrecy. The peddler's horse was found wandering around in the woods close to the farmhouse the next day. There was no sign of the peddler or his pack. Gourlay stopped visiting Mary Graham. After some days had passed, she called upon Gourlay to ask him why his courtship seemed to have ended so suddenly. Gourlay was not quick-witted enough to think of any other response. He blurted out to her that he could not contemplate a relationship with her after what he had seen her doing on that terrible night. Mary turned on her heel and left his house in grim silence. Gourlay had signed his own death warrant. The Graham family did not wait long before they got rid of Gourlay and his big mouth. They ambushed him on his way home a couple of days later. He managed to run away, but they chased after him. Gourlay fell into the river. He would have been swept away there and then, but he managed to get a grip on a tuft of grass at the water's edge. The Grahams hurled stone after stone at him as he clung desperately to the bank. Finally, his fingers lost their grip and he slipped back into the waters and was drowned. The Grahams thought their secret was safe. They did not know that Gourlay had told his mother what he had seen. Shortly afterwards, Gourlay's battered body was recovered from the river, and his mother was filled with rage. Without hesitation, the old woman pointed the finger of blame at the Graham family. Unfortunately, the Grahams managed to escape into hiding and were never brought to justice. The peddler's body was found buried in moorland some years later. The ghost of Gourlay returned to the spot where he was killed. The ghost of Gourlay returned to the spot where he was killed by the Grahams to haunt the place. The cries of the poor man as he clung on to the banks of the river in the last moments of consciousness were heard in the same spot from time to time for a long time afterwards. Right, Derpy, I think we are going to wrap this up with probably do it more, and then that'll be it. We need to have some food. So, Slange me well. We might have a second go at the Western Gold tonight. So, oh, lovely. We off to Derpside. Come on, sit down properly. Right, oh, here we go. Thank you. No, that's not what you're supposed to do. It's not a show about you. Come on, out the way. What did you do on Friday night? I tuned in to watch Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra on a Friday, but instead of seeing a confused man from Dudley trying to read ghost stories, his bloody cat was in the way. Come on, Derps. Come on. He will suddenly just lunge at me. Right. Spinning Jenny. A small stream near the pretty town of Ballater in Deeside has been named the Spinning Jenny Burn, after a very persistent and industrious little ghost that has haunted its banks for many a year. All the beer burps again, do apologise. A small, bent old woman, she is seen to work away feverishly at her spinning wheel by the stream, oblivious to any mortal that might lay eyes on her. The ghost is completely harmless and has never been known to interact in any way with living people. Who she is or why she works so hard, no one knows. Well, goodness me, we are coming towards the end of the book. What are we up to? 1 hour and 15 minutes. I think this will be the last one for tonight, folks. So, in the magnificent United Federation of Planet Shot Glass, again, thank you, viewers. Kirsten, Steve in the United States, Slange me var. Last for tonight. The modernization of a manifestation. There are quite a few stories told of ghostly vehicles that have been witnessed the width and breadth of Scotland, and some have been included elsewhere in this book. None is quite as strange, however, as the story of a ghostly vehicle that changed with the times. The story originates in the Isle of Skye, where it is said that for many years the sound of galloping hooves and the clatter of wooden cartwheels would herald the arrival of a phantom horse carriage. The story originates in the Isle of Skye, where it is said that for many years the sound of galloping hooves and the clatter of wooden cartwheels would herald the arrival of a phantom horse-driven carriage to a house in a remote part of the island. Sometime after the invention of the motor car, the occupants of the house realized that they had not heard the coach and horses for some time. Then one night they heard another sound. Unmistakably, it was that of a motor car. The house was in an isolated spot and vehicles were few. So when the car's engines seemed to stop, the occupants of the house looked out of the window to see who had come to call on them. There was no one and nothing to be seen. Puzzled and a little disappointed, everybody sat down again. Then, a few seconds later, they heard the car engine start up again. The noise began to fade as if the car was driving away. But no matter how hard the people in the house peered into the darkness, no one could see anything. I think we'll go for a thunderclap. Oh, delicious. Strange me, wow. Right. They are going down into the kitchen to be washed up for Sunday night ghost stories on a Sunday. All right, we're down to Motherly Love, A Faithful Pet, The Black Dog of Tyree, and that's it. That's the end of that. That's the end of this book. Absolutely brilliant. We should have finished it off tonight, but no, we got hungry. So that's it for tonight. I hope you've had your money's worth. It's free, for goodness sake. Fingers crossed, we'll be back for Sunday night ghost stories on a Sunday, as nature intended. I'm off downstairs to have some supper and some Family Guy. So until then, as always, it behoves me to say thank you for watching. Why? Why not? What else are you going to do on a Friday night than watch a confused man from Dudley with holes in his head drink ghost stories and read alcohol? Anyway, until the next time, as ever, thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay out of trouble, and please don't have nightmares. Good night.